My Apache neighbor got jealous seeing a girl kiss me. I told her, "If you want, your turn next." That evening started like many other evenings in his life, quiet, familiar, and calm. The sun was slowly going down, painting the sky with soft orange and pink colors. The neighborhood looked peaceful, with small houses lined up neatly, trees standing still in the warm air, and children's voices fading as night approached. He had lived there for years, long enough to know almost everyone by face, if not by name. Life there was simple, and he liked it that way. He had just returned home from a long day of work. His mind felt tired, but his heart was light because someone special was coming to see him. She was not someone he had known for a long time, but their connection had grown quickly. They met through mutual friends, and what started as casual talks slowly turned into meaningful conversations. She understood his silences, and he respected her thoughts. There was comfort between them, the kind that doesn't need big words or promises. She arrived just before sunset. They sat outside, talking about small things, work, family, dreams they had once pushed aside. Sometimes they laughed, sometimes they simply listened. There was no rush, no pressure. The moment felt real and gentle, like something taken from everyday life rather than a dramatic story. As the evening cooled, she stood up to leave. They both knew it was time. Before going, she leaned in and placed a brief, innocent kiss on his cheek. It was quick, natural, and filled with warmth rather than excitement. He smiled, a little surprised but happy. She smiled back, waved goodbye, and walked away down the street. He didn't notice that someone else had seen everything. Across the street, behind a half-open window, his neighbor stood still. She was known in the area for being strong, quiet, and private. People respected her, but few truly knew her. She rarely shared her feelings and kept her personal life hidden behind polite smiles and short conversations. Most neighbors thought she preferred being alone. But that evening, something inside her shifted. She had stepped to the window just to close the curtains before night fully settled. That's when she saw them, him and the girl, standing close, sharing that brief moment. It wasn't dramatic or loud, but it struck her deeply. Her chest tightened, and she didn't immediately understand why. She told herself it meant nothing. After all, he was free to live his life, to meet people, to care for whoever he wanted. She had no right to feel anything. Yet as she pulled the curtain closed, a strange feeling stayed with her, something between jealousy, confusion, and regret. She tried to distract herself by making tea, turning on the television, and focusing on anything else. But her thoughts kept returning to the image of that quiet moment. She remembered how kind he had always been to her, helping with small repairs, greeting her warmly, asking about her day without expecting much in return. She had always assumed those moments were just neighborly kindness. Now she wasn't so sure. Meanwhile, he went inside his house, unaware of the emotional storm he had unknowingly caused. He changed clothes, sat on his couch, and replayed the evening in his mind. He felt grateful for the calm happiness he experienced. Life had been stressful lately, and moments like this reminded him that simple connections still mattered. Later that night, he stepped outside again to take out the trash. The street was quiet, lights glowing softly from windows. As he turned back toward his house, he noticed his neighbor outside as well. She was standing near her gate, pretending to check her phone, though her movements seemed uncertain. They exchanged a polite greeting. "Good evening," he said with a friendly nod. "Evening," she replied, her voice steady but slightly distant. He didn't think much of it at the time. To him, it was just another normal interaction. But to her, it took effort to appear calm. She felt awkward, unsure why his presence suddenly made her nervous. She wanted to say something meaningful but couldn't find the right words. They stood there for a few seconds, silence hanging between them. Then he smiled politely and went back inside. She watched him walk away, her thoughts louder than the quiet street around her. That night, she barely slept. Memories came back, small moments she had ignored before. times when she noticed his smile linger, or when she felt a strange comfort talking to him. She realized she had been protecting herself from feeling too much, believing that staying guarded was safer. Seeing him with someone else forced her to face the truth she had avoided. The next morning, the neighborhood woke up as usual. Birds chirped, people left for work, and daily routines continued. From the outside, nothing had changed, but inside her, everything felt different. She found herself watching the street more than usual, listening for his door, wondering where he was going. She felt frustrated with herself. She didn't want to be the kind of person who felt jealous or insecure. Yet emotions don't always follow logic. On the other side, he noticed her behavior had changed, even if only slightly. When they crossed paths later that day, she gave a short greeting and quickly walked away. He felt confused but didn't push. He believed everyone had their own moods and reasons. What he didn't know was that a simple moment, an ordinary goodbye, had quietly shifted the balance between them. That evening had planted something neither of them expected. A story that didn't begin with drama or intention, but with a silent realization. And although neither spoke about it yet, both felt that something had changed in the air of that quiet neighborhood. It was only the beginning. The days after that evening passed slowly, but something invisible had changed between them. The neighborhood still looked the same from the outside. People went to work, children played in the streets, and evenings arrived quietly. Yet beneath this normal routine, emotions were moving, growing stronger with each passing day. She began to notice him more than before. Every small sound made her look toward his house. When his door opened, she felt alert. When it stayed closed, she felt uneasy. She didn't understand why her thoughts kept circling around him. She told herself it was foolish. He was just a neighbor, nothing more. But her heart did not listen to logic. She found excuses to step outside more often. Sometimes she watered her plants longer than needed. Sometimes she checked the mailbox even when she knew it was empty. Other times she took slow walks around the block, hoping to cross paths with him by chance. Each time she saw him, her heart beat a little faster, though she tried not to show it. He noticed these small changes, but he didn't connect them to that evening. He simply thought she seemed different lately, more quiet, more distant, yet strangely present. When they greeted each other, her smile looked forced, and her eyes avoided his. This confused him. He wondered if he had done something wrong without realizing it. One afternoon, they met near the corner store. He was returning home with groceries when he saw her standing outside, holding a bag of items. She looked distracted, staring at the ground. "Hey," he said kindly, "need help with that?" She looked up, surprised, as if pulled out of deep thought. "Oh no, it's fine," she replied quickly. He nodded but noticed her hands were shaking slightly as she held the bag. "Are you sure? It's not a problem." She hesitated for a moment, then sighed softly. "All right, thank you." They walked together in silence. The air between them felt heavy, filled with words neither knew how to say. She could feel his presence beside her, calm and steady. It made her both comfortable and uneasy at the same time. When they reached her house, she thanked him again. He smiled and said, "Any time." As he turned to leave, she almost called his name. The words stayed stuck in her throat. She watched him walk away, feeling disappointed in herself for staying silent. That night she sat alone in her living room, lights dimmed, her thoughts loud. She kept replaying moments from the past, small talks over the fence, shared laughter during neighborhood gatherings, his thoughtful gestures that she had once brushed off as simple kindness. Now she wondered if she had missed something important. She felt a strange mix of jealousy and regret. Seeing him with another girl had hurt more than she expected, not because she wanted to compete, but because it forced her to face feelings she had hidden from herself. She had built walls around her heart for years, believing it was safer that way, but those walls were now cracking. Meanwhile, he was also reflecting, though in a different way. He noticed her distance and felt unsettled by it. He respected her space, but her silence felt unfamiliar. He missed their easy conversations. He began to realize how much he valued her presence in his daily life, even if he had never thought deeply about it before. One evening, he decided to check on her. Not out of suspicion, but out of concern. He knocked gently on her door. After a moment, she opened it, surprised to see him. "Hey," he said softly, "I just wanted to see if everything's okay. You've seemed a bit off lately." She froze for a second. Her heart raced. She hadn't expected him to notice, let alone care enough to ask. "I'm fine," she replied quickly, but her voice lacked confidence. He studied her face, not pushing, just observing. "All right," he said after a pause. "Just thought I'd ask." There was an awkward silence. She wanted to speak, to explain, but fear held her back. Fear of rejection, fear of changing things forever. "I should let you go," she finally said. He nodded. "Take care." As the door closed, she leaned against it, her emotions overwhelming her. She realized she was tired of hiding, tired of pretending she felt nothing. Yet she still didn't know how to face the truth. The following days were filled with quiet tension. They crossed paths often but spoke less. Each meeting felt loaded with unspoken emotions. The neighborhood felt smaller, the silence louder. She began to understand that jealousy was not about possession. It was about realizing what mattered too late. She didn't want to lose him, not to someone else, not to silence. He, on the other hand, started questioning his own feelings. He wondered why her distance bothered him so much, why he felt disappointed when she walked away without talking, why he cared. Neither of them had answers yet. But both were standing at the edge of something new, something honest, something real. And though fear still held them back, the distance between them was slowly filling with truth, waiting for the moment it would finally be spoken. The tension between them had been building for days, like a quiet storm that never fully arrived but never left either. Every time they saw each other, there was something unfinished hanging in the air. Small smiles felt heavier. Short greetings felt incomplete. Both of them sensed that if nothing was said soon, the distance would only grow. One late afternoon, fate placed them together again. The neighborhood was unusually quiet. Most people were still at work and the street felt calm and still. He was outside fixing a loose step near his front door when she walked past, carrying a small bag from the local shop. She slowed when she saw him, unsure whether to stop or keep going. He noticed her hesitation and straightened up. "Hey," he said gently, "how have you been?" She paused, then answered, "I've been okay." Her voice was polite but careful. They stood there for a moment, neither moving. The silence felt heavier than before. He wiped his hands and leaned slightly against the railing, studying her face. She looked tired, not physically but emotionally, as if something was weighing on her mind. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. "Maybe we could talk." Her heart skipped. She hadn't expected that. Part of her wanted to say no and walk away, but another part of her knew this was the moment she had been avoiding. She nodded slowly. "All right." They moved to a small bench near his house. It was nothing special, just a simple place to sit, but it felt important now. The evening breeze was soft, and the sky was beginning to change color again, much like the evening when everything started. He spoke first. "I feel like something's been off between us lately. I don't know what it is, but I wanted to ask instead of guessing." She looked down at her hands. Her fingers were locked together tightly. For a moment she said nothing. Then she took a deep breath. "I didn't plan for things to feel this way," she said quietly. "I didn't even understand it at first." He listened without interrupting, giving her the space to continue. "When I saw you with someone else that evening," she said slowly, "it caught me off guard, not because you did anything wrong. You didn't. It just made me realize something about myself." He felt surprised but stayed calm. "What did it make you realize?" She hesitated, then looked up at him. Her eyes were honest, almost vulnerable. "That I cared more than I ever admitted, maybe more than I allowed myself to feel." The words hung between them. He felt them sink in deeply. He hadn't expected this, but at the same time, something inside him felt strangely relieved. "I never meant to make things uncomfortable for you," he said carefully. "I didn't even know you felt that way." "I know," she replied quickly. "That's the hardest part. You didn't do anything wrong. These feelings are mine to deal with." There was a pause. He leaned back, thinking. He realized that hearing her honesty stirred something in him too. For days, he had been questioning why her silence bothered him so much. Now he was beginning to understand. He smiled gently, trying to ease the heaviness. "You know," he said, half joking but sincere, "if you ever felt like saying something sooner, you could have. I'm not someone who runs away from honest conversations." She let out a small, nervous laugh. "I was afraid of changing things," he nodded. "Change can be scary, but silence can be worse." She looked at him, surprised by his openness. She had expected awkwardness, maybe even discomfort. Instead, she felt understood. Then, in an attempt to lighten the moment and break the remaining tension, he spoke in a calm, almost playful tone. "I guess life has a funny way of revealing things. Sometimes when you see someone else step close, it makes you realize where you stand." She met his eyes, understanding the meaning behind his words. It wasn't a challenge or a promise. It was honesty, plain and simple. "I didn't want to feel jealous," she admitted, "but I couldn't ignore it either." "Jealousy doesn't always mean something bad," he replied. "Sometimes it's just a signal, a reminder of what matters." She sat quietly, absorbing his words. For the first time in days, she felt lighter. Saying the truth out loud had taken courage, but it also brought relief. They talked for a long time after that. Not about big decisions or the future, but about themselves. About past choices, fears, and the reasons they both tended to keep their emotions guarded. They discovered how similar they were in that way, both careful, both afraid of getting hurt, both slow to trust. As the sky darkened, the conversation softened. There was no rush, no pressure to define anything, just two people sharing a moment of honesty. When it was time to go, she stood up and adjusted her bag. "Thank you for listening," she said sincerely. "I didn't know how much I needed to say those things." "I'm glad you did," he replied. "Whatever happens next, I respect your honesty." She smiled, this time without forcing it. "That means a lot." They went their separate ways that evening, but something had changed. The tension was no longer heavy. It had transformed into understanding. Both of them lay awake that night, thinking, not with confusion this time, but with clarity. They knew that whatever path lay ahead, they had crossed an important moment together. And that moment, simple, honest, and quiet, became the turning point neither of them would forget. The days after their honest conversation felt different, as if the air between them had cleared. Nothing dramatic happened right away, but both of them noticed the change. The silence that once felt heavy now felt calm. When they crossed paths, their greetings were warmer, their smiles more natural. There was no pressure to act a certain way, just an unspoken understanding that something important had been shared. She woke up one morning feeling lighter than she had in weeks. For the first time in a long while, her thoughts were not racing. She made her morning tea and stood by the window, watching the street come to life. People walked by, cars passed slowly, and the world moved on as usual. But inside her, there was a quiet sense of peace. Speaking the truth had not broken anything. Instead, it had freed her. She thought about her past a lot during those days. About how she had learned to protect herself by staying distant. About the times she chose silence over honesty because it felt safer. She realized that she had spent years avoiding emotional risks, convincing herself that she was fine on her own. And in many ways, she was. But she also understood now that avoiding pain sometimes meant avoiding connection too. Across the street, he was also reflecting. He noticed how often she came to his mind during simple moments, while making coffee, while locking his door, while sitting quietly in the evening. He hadn't expected her honesty to affect him so deeply. It made him look at his own feelings more closely. He realized that he had grown comfortable with her presence in his life, maybe more than he had admitted to himself. He remembered small things, how she listened carefully when he spoke, how she noticed details others missed, how calm he felt talking to her. He had always seen her as strong and independent. Now he saw something more, someone who felt deeply but chose caution over exposure. One afternoon they met again, this time naturally, without tension or hesitation. She was outside tending to her plants when he walked by. She looked up and smiled. "Good afternoon," she said. "Good afternoon," he replied. "Your garden looks great." "Thank you," she said, genuinely pleased. "It's been helping me clear my mind." He nodded. "Sometimes simple things do that." They talked for a few minutes about ordinary topics, the weather, neighborhood news, daily routines. But beneath the surface, there was a sense of comfort that hadn't been there before. No awkward pauses, no guarded words. He noticed how relaxed she seemed. She noticed how attentive he was. It felt like two people slowly learning how to stand in the same space honestly. Later that evening, she went for a walk alone. The sky was darkening and the streetlights were coming on one by one. As she walked, she thought about what honesty had given her. Not answers, not promises, but clarity. She no longer felt trapped inside her own thoughts. Even if nothing more happened between them, she knew she had done something brave by speaking her truth. She also realized that jealousy had never been her true problem. It had simply been a signal pointing towards something she had ignored. Once she understood that, the feeling lost its power over her. He, on the other hand, found himself thinking about balance. He cared about the girl he had been seeing, but he also understood that relationships required attention and honesty. He didn't want to hurt anyone, and he didn't want to ignore his own feelings either. Life wasn't always simple, and he knew he had choices to make carefully. One evening, he sat on his porch, watching the quiet street. She stepped outside her house around the same time. They exchanged a look, then both smiled almost at the same moment. "Nice evening," he said. "It is," she replied. "Feels peaceful." They stood there, not rushing to leave. There was no need to fill the silence. It felt comfortable, like a shared pause. "I've been thinking," he said after a while, "about what you said the other day." She listened, calm but attentive. "I respect how honest you were," he continued. "It made me think about myself too, about how easy it is to overlook what's right in front of us." She nodded. Honesty has a way of doing that. They didn't define anything that night. They didn't label feelings or make decisions. Instead, they agreed on something simpler: to keep talking, to stay honest, and to respect each other's space. As days turned into a week, their interactions became more natural. Sometimes they talked for a few minutes. Other times they just waved. There was no expectation, only consistency. Trust was forming quietly, without effort. She noticed that she was no longer anxious when she saw him. She didn't wonder where she stood or what he thought. She felt grounded. Whatever happened next would happen naturally. He noticed that he felt calmer too, less confused, more aware of his own emotions. He appreciated the way things were unfolding, not rushed, not forced. The neighborhood, unchanged on the surface, now felt warmer to both of them. It had become the place where two people learned the value of honesty, patience, and self-reflection. One night, as she prepared for bed, she smiled to herself. Not because she had answers, but because she no longer feared the questions. She had taken a step forward, and that mattered. And he, lying awake in his own house, felt grateful for a conversation that had started with courage and continued with respect. They were not rushing toward a conclusion. They were learning, slowly and thoughtfully, how to move forward without losing themselves. That quiet growth, unseen by others, was the heart of their story. Time continued to move forward, quietly and steadily, just like the days in the neighborhood. Nothing dramatic happened all at once. There were no sudden decisions or emotional scenes. Instead, the ending of their story grew slowly, shaped by small moments, honest thoughts, and quiet understanding. Both of them settled into a new rhythm. They spoke more often now, but without pressure. Sometimes they talked for a few minutes by the gate. Other times they shared a short walk down the street. And sometimes they simply exchanged a smile and went on with their day. What mattered most was that everything felt natural. She noticed how different she felt compared to before. The jealousy that once troubled her had faded into something softer and wiser. It no longer controlled her thoughts. She understood now that feelings were not something to fear. They were messages, not mistakes, learning that had changed her deeply. She also felt proud of herself. For years she had avoided emotional risks. She believed strength meant staying guarded. But now she saw strength in honesty, even when it felt uncomfortable. Speaking her truth had not made her weak. It had made her free. He too felt changed. He became more thoughtful in his actions and words. He paid closer attention to how his choices affected others. He realized that life was not just about moving forward, but about being present and aware. He appreciated calm moments more than before. One afternoon, they sat together on the bench near his house, watching the sky slowly shift as evening approached. The street was quiet, and a cool breeze moved through the trees. "It's strange," he said gently, breaking the silence, "how one conversation can change so much." She smiled. "Not change," she replied. "Clarify," he nodded, understanding. "Yes, clarify." They talked about life, about how plans don't always follow straight lines and how people sometimes discover important truths when they least expect them. There was no regret in their words, only acceptance. "I used to think avoiding feelings kept things simple," she said, "but it only made things heavier. And facing them," he replied, "doesn't always give answers, but it gives peace." That evening they both went home with a quiet sense of closure. Not an ending filled with excitement, but one filled with calm. They knew where they stood with themselves and with each other. Days passed. The neighborhood remained familiar and steady. People greeted each other. Life continued, but for them, something important had been completed. She stopped looking out the window with restless thoughts. She focused more on her own life, her interests, her routines, her personal growth. She felt complete on her own, not dependent on expectations or outcomes. He, too, found balance. He became clearer about what he wanted and what he needed. He made choices carefully, guided by honesty rather than impulse. When they met now, there was no confusion in their eyes. Only respect. One evening, as the sun set softly behind the houses, they stood across the street from each other. He waved. She waved back. Neither felt the need to say more. That simple moment said everything. They had learned that not every story ends with promises or dramatic turns. Some stories end with understanding, with growth, with two people becoming better versions of themselves because they chose honesty over silence. The jealousy that once sparked this journey had transformed into wisdom. The awkwardness had turned into comfort, and the uncertainty had settled into peace. As night fell, the streetlights came on, one by one, lighting the quiet road. Inside their homes, both felt a sense of calm they hadn't known before. They did not walk the same path, but they walked forward, stronger, clearer, and at peace. And that, in the end, was the most meaningful conclusion of all.